What's up, folks? We're gonna figure out, does this stay or does this go? It's been with me for a month now, a little over a month. This is the 70th Anniversary Player Series Stratocaster from Fender. This is not a sponsored video, unless you count my bank account as sponsoring it. But the short version is, yes, I'm keeping it. The longer version we'll get into now. So, when I unboxed this guitar, I really liked everything that I was initially encountering. The fretwork seemed really good initially. Just doing the little feel down the edges test, there were no sharp edges. When I went up and down each string, there were no dead spots. I did have to take some relief out of the neck, not a big deal. That's an easy adjustment to make. I initially thought I might have some janky electronics, but that turned out to be a bad cable. Got a new cable in, and no problem. The two biggest points of concern for me that were not cosmetic were the bent steel bridge saddles here, because I've had other guitars with bent saddles, and I know how my picking technique is. I tend to ride the saddles, and I was kind of nervous that once I got this guitar restrung and set up how I like it, depending on how much I had to lower them, those grub screws might be tearing into my hand. Yes, I can feel the grub screws. Do they slice into my hand? No. Is it still a little bit annoying feeling? Sure. Now, here's the big question. Is it worth buying a set of block saddles and replacing them when I do my strings again? I'm really on the fence. That's how little of an issue it is. It's just a different feeling. And kind of what I would equate it to, it's like, imagine having a little bit more of a sharp edge on like a Tune-o-matic bridge, where it's not like razor blade sharp where it's cutting you, but you can definitely feel it more. That's the nearest example I could give. The other point of concern was the tuners. These are the Fender vintage gear tuners. I wasn't sure about these, and I'm still a little bit on the fence about them. Not because they don't hold tuning, not because there's string slippage, not because I get pitch drift or anything like that. And actually, pitch drift or string slip, I would also be looking at the nut a little bit, and that's not an issue at all. The issue that I anticipated is kind of the issue that I'm having with them. It's labor intensive. Changing strings, or if I don't do a lot of gigging, but if you were a gigging guitarist, if you had a string break, replacing it on the fly is not fast at all with these. So that's a consideration. That's really the biggest criticism that I have of this guitar. But I did find kind of a system that works for me. If I'm replacing all 6 strings, it's just sort of take my booger hook here, and I'm just going to take my string up through the post, and I try and get all of the slots like facing the top of the headstock so I can run the string straight through. And I'll use the base of my finger, I'll just kind of use the base of my hand here, and I'll measure halfway up my index finger. That's where I'll snip the string, and that'll give me a good consistent 2.5 winds around the post on the wound strings, and it's like 3 winds around the post for the plain strings. And that's worked pretty well for me. Is it scientific? Nope. Does it work? in my experience, and that's good enough for me. Tone-wise, still love the guitar. Is it gonna do heavy metal? No. Can you still get a pretty good saturated tone? Sure, yeah. So as an example, is for how saturated of a tone you can get, this is going through my Line 6 Helix. And the patch that I'm on, the amp I'm using is a Rock Reverb 100 boosted with a Tube Screamer overdrive, and of course I have a noise gate on it. But here's kind of how aggressive you can get, and I'm gonna play a metal riff so that you can get an idea that yeah, you can get plenty of saturation, but no, you can't get it the way that a humbucker does. So no, you're not gonna get like super balls to the walls metal, but you can get good alt rock out of it. So yeah, you can get a good saturated tone with this guitar. It's not going to do metal because you just can't, you don't have the output. You just don't have the output from the pickups. And even if you were to throw a ton of gain at it, you're going to get really bad hum. And I did try that just for shits and giggles a couple of weeks ago. I did try to see how like filthy dirty a tone I could get, and I was using actually my Friedman BE overdrive into my Delta Blues 210 amp, and I had to turn up my noise gate so high that the note would choke off like immediately, so there was no sustain. Like as soon as I would hit a note, it would just cut off. So it would be kind of a deal where it's almost like a volume swell. Yeah, so this is not gonna be a metal machine unless you modify it and, you know, replace a pickup at the very minimum at the bridge. But you can get a lot of great tones out of it. As it is, you're going to get great, you know, classic rock tones. You're going to get really great, really good, like alt rock tones, clean and dirty. I'm not a jazz guy, but I imagine, you know, it's a Strat. You'll be able to get some good, nice, fat jazz tones out of it if you roll the tone control off for the middle and neck pickup. And you're going to get some nice blues tones out of it. It's just a matter of setting up your pedals and your amp to accommodate what you're going after, and keeping in mind that if you're somebody like me that is used to humbucker guitars, you're going to have to play around with your noise gate and make adjustments a little bit more with the single coil versus humbuckers because they're just inherently a little noisier. I highly recommend if you got a grand kicking around and you want to get a Strat and not really have to worry about doing anything to it, this is the one. The 70th Anniversary Player Series. And with this being kind of a year-long production run, if Fender has stopped production already, your best alternative, I think, is going to be the Player Series 2, whether it's a Strat or a Mustang or Tele or Jaguar or Jazzmaster, I think, are the bases that they cover with the Player Series 2. But they incorporate a lot of the features that this has. You know, the rolled fretboard edges, the vintage tuners. Actually, the Player Series Strats, I think, do get block saddles. Not 100% sure. I know the Teles that I've seen definitely have block saddles, though. They don't have a bone nut. They do have a synthetic bone, but I imagine that's perfectly fine. People have been using synthetic bone for ages. PRS uses synthetic bone on lots of their SE guitars, and they're perfectly fine when they're glued onto the guitar right, and when the guitar doesn't suck massive donkey dick other than that. But yeah, if given my druthers, yeah, I would take this over a PRS SE Silver Sky. 100%. I would take a Player Series 2 Fender over a PRS SE Silver Sky. I would take this over the new PRS SE NF3. And the reason that I'm saying that is just from a quality control standpoint in my experience. And I'm talking sample size of 1 with the Mexican Fender versus a sample size of 3 with the PRS SE Silver Sky. And all 3 were duds in one way or another, and I just gave up. So yeah, for $1,000, for single coil, 3 single coils, look at the Fender Players, the 70th Anniversary Stratocaster, which is the bottom level 70th Anniversary Strat as far as cost. And if you can't get your hands on one of these, look real hard at the Player Series 2. They're actually, and the Player Series 2 is actually going to come in like $50 under a PRS SE. And I would say that even though you're paying $50 less, you're probably getting $150 better guitar when it comes to quality control. So that's my end of honeymoon period review on this guy. The next guitar that I buy will probably be one of the new S2 Custom 2408s, and that's assuming I don't buy an amplifier instead in that intervening time. There are a couple of amps I've got my eye on pretty hard that are strong contenders for the money that I have set aside for that S2 Custom 2408. So we'll see what shall happen. Hope you enjoyed. I'm just a moderately drunk dude telling you about some guitars. Laters.